blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me, His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood His mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Amazing Grace is one of the most beautiful hymns that's ever been written. And it has one of the most beautiful backstories that inspired these words. It was written by a man named John Newton, who lived in the 1700s in England. And growing up, he had a very godly mother when he was really young, who taught him the scriptures and taught him to believe in Jesus. But she died when he was just 7 years old. And when he was 11, he went to sea with his father, and he ended up becoming a really godless sailor who lived a very licentious lifestyle and was just following his own, the lusts of the flesh and whatever he desired. And he had bad companions who were having a really bad influence on him. But he had several experiences where God touched his life and showed him that he was there and got him thinking about the things of the Spirit and about Christianity and the state of his soul. And he ended up becoming a slave to a slave master in Africa, living basically starving and in a really bad condition. But he escaped, and he ended up becoming the master of a slave ship himself. But he had had these experiences where God was showing himself in his life, in John's life. And one of these things that God had placed in his path was a friendship with a girl named Mary Catlett. And their families had been friends since he was little, but they'd kind of drifted apart, and then they came back together and met when she was 14 and he was 17, and he was just smitten with her. And she was a very godly girl, and she wasn't interested in him at the time, but he was really interested in her, and she had an influence on his life that she probably didn't know about at that time. And so he went and became a sailor, but during this time he read a book by Thomas à Kempis called Imitation of Christ, and that really affected him too. And it was a real process that brought him out of his involvement in the slave trade. But one of these things, another of them, was a storm that arose on one of his trips back to England, and he became very frightened for his life. And he remembered the scriptures that his mother had taught him when he was young, and he called out to God to rescue him. And he ended up making it safely through the storm. And eventually he gave up the slave trade and became very converted to Christ, a very passionate Christian. And when he came back to England, his friend Mary noticed the difference in him, and they ended up getting married. And he talked a lot about her over the years, and in his letters, the influence that she had on him, and how through their relationship they should be focused on glorifying God, and not just being grateful for each other, but using their relationship to bring others to Christ. And he became an ardent preacher of the gospel and an abolitionist, and he wrote pamphlets and was well-spoken and well-known at the time, just serving God. And he was very ardent and zealous in his faith because of what he had seen that God had done for him, the grace that God had bestowed on him in his life and poured out, even though he didn't deserve it, just like we don't deserve it. And he actually wrote a lot of hymns, including Amazing Grace. But he said that all of the hymns, and there were many of them, and other works that he wrote, but he said that they were inspired by his personal experience, what he had seen God doing in his life, and just his words were so powerful in these hymns, just pouring out his gratitude and writing about his relationship with God in them. And you see that in this beautiful hymn. No wonder it resonates with so many people. But we did a video kind of with his story about grace as we find it in the Book of Mormon. It's really misunderstood, but you can check that out if you want to. And I just want to leave you with a verse from the Book of Mormon on grace, and a final thought with a quote from John Newton. So this is from 2 Nephi chapter 10, verses 23 and 24. And it says, "Therefore, cheer up your hearts, and remember that ye are free to act for yourselves, to choose the way of everlasting death, or the way of eternal life. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, reconcile yourselves to the will of God, and not to the will of the devil and the flesh. And remember, after ye are reconciled unto God, that it is only in and through the grace of God that ye are saved." It's only by his grace that we are saved. And I want to leave you with this quote from John Newton. He said, "It is impossible that either men or angels can fully sound the depth of this one sentence, that Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners."
My chains are gone. I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace.